All right, Cheeky Clinic listeners. So today we are taking things in a different turn and going towards our Instagram and some questions that you wanted to know or topics that you wanted us to talk about on the show. So we're going to dive into that today.
You're listening to the Cheeky Clinic podcast. I'm Dr. Chris Delp.
And I'm Kat Parker Delp, owner of Duluth Med Spa.
If you've arrived at a point in life where good enough is simply just not good enough for you, you're in the right place.
Here we cover topics like sexual health and wellness, hormonal balance, and body optimization. And we deliver to you lessons from our travels from hard-to-get-to places around the world.
We are so excited you're here to venture off the beaten path with us into the taboo, where no subject is off limits.
Welcome to the Cheeky Clinic. Let's dive in. Since we started our podcast, people have some questions. A lot of different questions, but I'm going to dive into a couple of them. Some you're not going to, some that you'll need to answer for us. This one is in terms of sexual health. And actually, this question was directed at me, I believe, in terms of sexual health. What do you think men need to know about female anatomy? But I'm going to leave that to you because I know my female anatomy. It was never taught to me. I had to learn it on my own, and I still feel like even as a 53-year-old woman, I don't know my own anatomy, which is sad to say. But anyway, tell me what you think men need to know about female anatomy, because there's a lot to female anatomy. And this should be a whole topic of its own. This should be a whole show of its own. So let's keep it a little brief, because I think that female anatomy deserves its own limelight.
Of course you do.
It's an important subject.
You want probably 5 or 6 episodes on that.
I know. It's a great subject, but I feel like there's just not enough out there about it. And it's a deep topic.
So the premise of the question, let's stick with the premise, which is, what do men need to know?
Yep. What do men need to know about female anatomy?
And let me just start with what we learned in medical school.
Nothing. I don't know that men learned anything about female anatomy.
Did you go to medical school?
No, but I don't think that men learned anything about female anatomy.
No comments from the peanut gallery. You may have the equipment, but I know the equipment. And let's talk just briefly about, you say, it's way different. No, the female anatomy is exactly the same as men. There's some differences, but you have analogous structures. Now, the difference is we studied the crap out of men. Because it's out there. We can look at it. We've got a take-home kit. We can, and a lot of your structures can be a little more difficult to find, and it's okay to.
But let's be honest. Some they just don't study that. Not that it's difficult to find. That there's a lot of. It doesn't seem to be as important as men's anatomy when it's studied. But that's just my opinion. Go ahead. Little feminism coming out there. But
so,
what do men need to know? Go ahead. What do men need to know?
And that's because men are very objective oriented. You want results? You talk to a man.
Yeah.
You want a process? You talk to women. And that's so true. And we'll talk about this later, about the process of a female orgasm. It's a process. And men just want an objective. We are very goal-oriented. Yeah. So the premise of the question was what you want to know about female anatomy. And we, in medical school, we glossed over a lot of the female anatomy, and there's been pioneering research that's only been since the 1990s where we started to really go into and actually dissect female anatomy. Now, one of the interesting things is they talk about how many nerves are in the clitoris. Do you know where that research came from?
Men.
Nope.
No.
They did that study on cows.
Oh yeah, that's right. They did.
So
They did that study on
it's
cows.
like when we talk about research and all the knowledge that we've gained from women, the original research was
From cows.
Yeah, from cows. Anyway, I'm not gonna get
You're
into
not going
any kind
anywhere.
of trouble about talking about cows and clitorises. But what I'd like men to know is, first of all, if you expect women to climax with penis and vagina sex,
We call that
you are-
PIV sex.
PIV sex.
PIV sex. Penis and vagina sex.
you are going to be sorely disappointed because you've got less than a 50% chance
You've
of
got
doing
less
that.
than 10% chance.
Yeah, so that ain't going to happen. So what we need to talk about is that females have analogous structures to men. It's not just the clitoris. There's the clitoris has parts, just like men have parts. And if you look at the entire clitoral anatomy, it's almost as long as a penis. It's just that it traverses inwards. And so if you would expect to climax by having a woman rub your eyebrow, that's the equivalent of you expecting a woman to have a climax with PIV sex. It's not the right organ that you're going for. We talk about the G spot, which is not really a spot, but a region. And women certainly have nerve endings there, like men have nerve endings everywhere. We've got lots of different pleasure spots, but where the action is, and if you expect a woman to climax just using PIV sex, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah,
It might on occasion.
Penis and vagina sex is out.
Yeah.
It is outdated.
In and out.
It's outdated.
It is outdated. So what I'd really like men to know about female anatomy is that there is, first of all, that the clitoris is not just one thing. It extends all the way down. It actually attaches, divides and attaches to the pelvic floor and the pelvic bones. And that if you really want to know female anatomy, you have to explore it, and you have to have somebody who's willing to talk about their female anatomy, and that's usually one of the problems is women don't explore themselves enough, so that they can communicate that to the partner. You know, men. One of the pressures of men is we're supposed to be good at everything that we do. That's a societal expectation, including sex. And we got no training, no knowledge, and we've got women who often are reluctant to tell us.
Well, women were raised in a different way. So women were raised that you don't talk about that, or if you do that, then you're a whore or this, or there's all these societal things about women exploring themselves. And that is something we need to break beyond. That needs to be gone. But
so what I'd like men to know is that you need to work it, and when you're working it, you need maybe the woman's help in guiding you to where those pleasure spots are. And the clitoris is where it's at. There's all sorts of other the vestibular glands, which nobody has even talked about in the past.
So really, you need to give pleasure. This is my take on it.
Go for it.
You give pleasure to the woman before the P goes in the V. Give her pleasure. Pleasure can be.
So one of the urologists.
The P before the V.
That I was talking with was
pleasure before the P, right? Pleasure before the P.
Was talking about one of the problems that men have is premature ejaculation. And one of the therapies that he was discussing was that you pleasure the woman first, and then it really doesn't matter. And then the pressure's off of the man, and oftentimes it's that pressure that causes premature ejaculation. So his training on premature ejaculation was
Pleasure the woman first.
pleasure, yeah.
Absolutely.
And then it really doesn't matter.
Right, and then it doesn't matter. Truly, that is so true. Yeah, the premature ejaculation or that, yeah, I agree. 100% believer. Pleasure the woman first.
So the answer to the question in
Make
terms
sure
of
that she gets pleasure first, and then you're good.
yeah,
That's the answer.
is learn the clitoris, learn where it extends down to, and become familiar with toys.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah,
Woohoo.
you want to bring in your toy chest?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
very
toy
good.
chest.
That'll be another episode. All right, next question.
All right. The other question was how to incorporate play, breaking through boundaries. Like, how do you incorporate play into your life, even with a partner that may not be as comfortable with play as the other partner? How do you do that?
Was this one of the questions posed by our producer?
It may or may not be. I don't know. I am a big proponent of play.
Now, are we talking play in general or sexual play? Or
I think play in general. I think play in general leads to sexual play. That's my opinion. I think play in general, just to have the spontaneous ridiculousness of spontaneous play. I can remember a time back when you had a horrible, horrible day at work, and you had voiced that to me, I think, via text or phone call, of what a horrible, horrible day you'd had. It was a long 12-hour day, and I thought I was going to switch that mood up and bring out water guns.
I remember that. I came home from my very, very bad day, exited the car, and you jumped out from behind the garage with an automated squirt gun and hit me full blower. And it was 10 pumps of that squirt gun with me being knocked backwards before I even realized what was going on.
And then I had a hose waiting that I was just going to drench you.
Yeah.
And this is the winter. This was fall in Minnesota, so it was dark out. You had no idea I was hiding behind the tree with the water gun. I mean, simple play like that can lead from somebody from a really bad day into letting things go and getting into the moment for play with their spouse, I think.
And certainly you could have met me with a glass of wine, and I could have whined to you about my very, very bad day.
It was a super soaker. That was the name of it.
Yeah,
it was a super soaker. I bought out Target of super soakers. They were everywhere.
Yep. And you can certainly talk about your day. But now I didn't want to talk about my day at all. I had no desire to talk about my day. My only desire was to get your head under a faucet somehow, but you were still shooting me, so it was very hard to do.
But play, I think, comes from just wanting to take the edge off a little bit. You know, I mean.
So part of the question was broaching play and the questions of play, and when people are reluctant to play because playing is for kids. Now, what the data shows is that playfulness in adults extends your life. There's no doubt it combats depression, it increases mental growth, and improves longevity. But there's sometimes communication barriers when it comes to that, because the expectation is we are now adults. We don't play. And how do you broach that with your partner, whether it's sexual play, or playfulness in general, acting like a kid, because there's a lot of pressure for you to not act like a kid. And with a lot of the barriers, with all of this, is having a partner that you can be a little bit uncomfortable with, because as practice happens, it becomes easier and easier. And just in general play, talking about this, trying it, and suffering through that first awkward moment. Your first kiss, at least my first kiss, was very awkward. And if I never would have done that, I never would have kissed anybody. But you get through that first kiss and that second kiss, which is also really pretty bad. According to the people that told me, that was really bad.
First kiss as a child, as a youngster, huh?
Yeah. For the first 30 or 40, the feedback I got was universally would not recommend. Dr. Delp, yeah, it's a good thing you're going to be a physician, because as a Romeo, you ain't going to cut it. But it's by continually practicing that communication with play, and we're just talking general play, just doing it, making it uncomfortable, and breaking through that first one, and then the second one becomes easier, the third one becomes easier and easier, and as you continue to do that, it becomes more and more natural, and by more natural, we all have a desire to play.
We all have a desire to play. Everybody wants to play.
Yeah.
It's just how we were.
Giving yourself permission. Yeah. And as a partner, if you do it first, it gives me permission to do it second.
Right, right.
So whoever the first one is to take that first step,
it gives the partner the permission.
And
to
I think
do the same.
And I think play in general, that's a great way to start. And we'll save the sexual play for episode 69.
Something like that. And let's see here. So our next, one of the other questions we had here was, how do you keep romance alive with a blended family, or just romance alive in general, with busy society? That one, I think, so much comes into play in that, depending at where the stage you are in your life is. Keeping romance alive in a busy time, I think one thing people need to learn, and this was a hard thing for me to learn, so hard for me to learn, was scheduling sex. That is a thing. That is a thing. When that was first introduced to me years ago, someone goes, well, people talk about scheduling sex. I was like, oh, you don't want sex to be scheduled. It's spontaneous. And honeymoons are scheduled sex. When people have a honeymoon, they are scheduling a week of sex. Let's be honest. There is no reason why you cannot schedule sex. And I think that is a huge barrier for some people to look at scheduling sex as being like, oh, I have to have this instant sex night. And that's not the case. You can schedule sexy time, put it on the calendar, and prior to sexy time, build up the sexy time. Send some sexy messages. Send some sexy text. But taking that time and feeling that scheduling sexy time is not a bad thing. I mean, truly, honeymoons are scheduled sex. So it's not a problem. So you can schedule that. I think bringing in, I don't know, what do you think about scheduled sex? Is that a taboo thing? Is scheduled sex a bad thing? I think it took me a while to get past thinking about that in the past, like scheduled sex should be spontaneous, but really it doesn't need to be
Sex can be,
spontaneous.
and it sometimes should be
Right. Agree.
spontaneous, because we all need to have a period of time where like a connection happens,
And it happens.
and it happens, and it and when we talk about what part of our lives are important, is that how does that fit in terms of priorities, in terms of taking out the garbage? Are you going to really regret taking out the garbage? Or are you really going to regret taking the opportunity for that spontaneous sex? So I think the bigger perspective is how does that fit in your life? Because when we talk about where the importance is for sex, it's different for different people. It may be lower on the priority list, maybe higher on the priority list. There may be difference between a couple on where that priority list is. And so
I think if it's high on one person's priority list and it's low on the other person's priority list, then it becomes a problem on the person's priority list that it's high on.
we've talked a little, we mentioned that sex may be about 10% of the relationship.
Yep.
Unless you're not getting enough, and then it's 90% of the relationship.
Exactly.
And if there's a mismatch, then there's extra work to be done, or extra exploration to be done. I don't like to talk about it as work. There's extra exploration to be done in terms of why there's a mismatch, and I think that offers an opportunity to dive into why that is. Anything that's important, you should make some time for. We talk about exercise. Exercise is important in everybody's life. If you don't schedule it, it ain't going to happen.
Yep.
And the busier your life gets,
yep,
the less you squeeze out other things, and you squeeze out things that may be important that you don't think are as important. Exercise goes away, sex goes away, all of these things goes away. Because, we got to just get this done, and this done, and this done, and this done. And relationships suffer. So timing, absolutely. Also, acknowledging that spontaneous sex may take priority over your next phone call, your next business meeting, getting to work late. Those kind of things are relationship builders that, and I'm not confessing that I've ever been late to work because of this. But what am I gonna think about 5 years from now? That time that I was late for work and feeling really bad about that, or the time that I was late for work and feeling really good about it? I'm obviously going to feel really good about getting there late for work, because that's a higher priority.
Right.
So where does that occur in terms of your priority? Scheduling sex is great.
It's great.
Yeah, and even if nothing happens, you've got a block of time just with your partner, and
I want to note on that is that block of time, it doesn't have to be, it's not like scheduling sex is, PIV sex. It doesn't have to be that. It's scheduling that intimate time, scheduling that time to spend together. It's not about the sex all the time. It can be about exploring. It can be just the intimacy, communicating. It doesn't have to be about PIV every time.
Do you want to talk about your little Aria box?
I could talk about the Aria box. All right, so I came across this. Okay, so anybody that knows us knows we have a couple of doggos, great doggos, golden doodles, and they get a bark box every month. And when our bark box comes, the dogs go absolutely wild. They can sense it. They can smell there's treats in there. They can smell the toys in there, and they are going wild over the bark box. So I came across a box called an ARIA box. And this comes once a month. You can schedule it to come as often as you want. But I can get a monthly box, and it goes on your personality and your partner's personality. So you enter your partner into the program, and they have to answer questions about things that are important to them. You answer the same things, and once a month you get a box. And prior to that box, you get what do they call the story that
A
we
scene?
didn't the what?
A scene?
No, that we didn't do this last month because we're like, oh wait, we never got to the buildup of it in the box. What's the word I'm looking for? Don't know. Anyway, so it'll give you like a storyline, basically, your storyline, or that they build you up on what's coming in your box. And so, anyways, we can get this box, and it comes once a month, and you and your partner don't know what's in the box, but it can have anything to do with just like pleasure touches or hot and cold play or
So I think the bottom line
is scheduling a time. You can get your bark box and take the time to schedule your play time, and it can, I don't know. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah. So I think the bottom line when you're looking to expand your relationship, sometimes your own creativity isn't
Yes.
enough. And so there's other things that you can do, like this Aria box that like one of the things that I got were these little fingertip things that had sharp edges that you kind of like to be tickled with. It doesn't necessarily need to be sexual. It's just pleasurable.
It's play. It's play.
And I think that kind of play in a relationship is so important. And when you have something like that scheduled, whatever you want it to evolve in is great.
Great.
But scheduling
Time.
things for what's important to you, whether that's sex, whether that's
Working out, eating healthy,
yes.
no matter what. Scheduling is not bad.
Yeah, scheduling. And so I think that's the answer to the question. Schedule it.
Schedule it.
Date night. Date night followed by
And if your date night is the same kind of date every week, and it works for both of you, great. If that's, date night can be just schedule it. Bottom line is just schedule it. Schedule the time. Make the time. Yeah. If it's important, you make the time. And then we have one other last question here. And you're going to be a great one at this because I feel like sometimes I'm a horrible communicator. I know you think that I'm a good communicator. Sometimes I communicate too much. But how do you make communication sexy?
So you don't communicate too much. You talk too much. There's a difference. So what a great question.
How do you make it sexy, though? I communicate and I babble.
No,
like a babble.
No, and I withdraw the comment because you're very good when it comes to sexy communication.
Am I?
Yes, you
Okay.
are. And I one of the problems that I think we frequently encounter is that your partner has needs, you have needs, and there's some reluctance to communicate that. Now, as a man, I'm expected to know how to please you. And if you're telling me how to please you, there may be a sense that I'm not doing it right. Now, a lot of times the male ego is very, very fragile. We've been brought up to be heroes, to know things, to do things right. And if you're telling me, guiding me to be better, I may take that as I'm doing it wrong. And that can be very difficult. The the complexities of relationships can't be understated, and the fact that I might take that as I'm not doing a good job is a risk.
So how do you make it sexy? How do you make communication sexy?
So first of all, you never ever say you're doing it wrong. That's gonna
shut it down.
That's gonna shut everything down. You can always say, what I really like is when you, or if you would. And there's nothing less sexy than saying, we need to talk.
That is the worst.
Yeah. If there's a wilter, that's the biggest wilter there ever is. If you tell me we need to talk, I'm already checked out. I'm like, want to do anything other than being in that same room. But if you say in that voice of yours, oh, what I really like is when you, and then that positive reinforcement that when you're doing something right, you say something, and that you never ever fake it. You look at just straight up data. Most women have faked orgasms.
Well, you went from communication to sex, orgasm. Are we talking all of this is communicating in sex, or just communication in general?
If you're a man, all communication in
Is regarding
general
sex.
leads to sex. That's the only reason we communicate with women. Dudes, we can communicate.
Okay, that's fair.
But
Okay,
if I'm communicating with you, it's because there's a sex that
Okay,
might have
carry
been.
on. You made a point.
When we're talking about communication and sex, first you don't say that you're doing it wrong. You tell me what I'm doing right, and you can do it in ways. We can do it in ways that just encourage the positive behavior, but not faking an orgasm. If you fake an orgasm,
You're checked out.
Yeah, no, because if you
You're
just want it to
reinforcing.
end,
Yeah.
you're reinforcing bad
You're
behavior.
reinforcing bad behavior. I agree 100%. If you're faking it, you're just reinforcing that what that person was doing worked for you, and I think that is the craziest. Don't understand it.
Well, but you can also say, you don't need a goal. We talk about climax as a goal. Who cares?
Yeah.
You can have a goal, just having sex and being intimate, and
That can be your goal.
yeah, one person having a climax and one person doesn't. That's okay. So I think that's part of it, is not to have a goal in mind, and when you're communicating, not emphasizing you're doing it wrong. Tell somebody who's doing it right, and I just love that. Just 4 words, faster, slower, harder, softer. And
That's easy communication right
that is,
there.
yeah, because you don't want to have a lot. What you need to do is you got to, let's just dissect this for just a second. Right? What I really like to do is, no, just very simple in the moment, honest communication, but realizing that, there's pride. We have expectations that we bring into the bedroom, that I'm supposed to be really good, and I may not be, because it's shaped by our previous partners, and if previous partners have faked it and have said that this really feels
100%.
good because that was the societal expectation,
Mm-hmm.
our expectations are based on what
Our history.
Yep. Our history, what we see in the movies,
Yeah.
and PIV sex is always what makes a woman climax in the movies, and
That
the
ain't
data
it.
the data doesn't support that. It clearly doesn't support that at all. So your expectation is that you should climax with PIV sex, and if you're not, then you're doing something wrong. And my expectation is the same because that's what we've been exposed to, and so that's where it needs to stop. And you need to say, that's where we
Voice
both
what you
need to
want.
say, yeah. Voice
And-
what you want.
and-
What I really like is when
I
you.
think the answer is really, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexy. Communication doesn't have to be sexy. It just has to not be made to make the other person feel like it's something that they're doing wrong. I think that is really the answer. I mean, you need to be cautious about how you say things, and that makes the communication itself sexy.
Mhm.
If you're gearing that communication towards how the other person feels.
I think that the barrier is more on women.
Why do you say that?
Because men, and again, I go back to data. I'm a scientist. The data would suggest that men believe that women's bodies are much more beautiful than what women believe their bodies are. And their reluctance to communicate may have a lot of barriers there that men don't see. And then the flip side of that is men's pride is much more fragile than women may see.
Yeah, I agree.
So coming together on that may be the key for both of us.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So in the future, any questions that people may have, we're willing to tackle, both as a couple, as a physician, as a nurse, as a clinic owner. We're always happy to answer any of your questions.
Thanks for joining us on a cheeky adventure through the world of wellness. Follow our spicy tips, laugh out loud stories, and expert advice designed to keep you feeling youthful, vibrant, and always in the loop.
Follow the show so you don't miss a beat. Stay connected and let's keep the fun going.
And if there's a subject that you'd like to hear more about, please let us know. You can connect with us by clicking the contact link below or send us a message on social media.
Make sure to send this episode to a friend who could benefit from today's topics. And don't forget to leave the show a 5-star review.
Thanks for listening to The Cheeky Clinic. We'll see you in the next one.